Akansha, it's great to be here with you.
It's great to be here too. I'm super excited for this conversation.
So, why don't you start by telling us about yourself?
I have two young kids, a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old boy. So I certainly get the share of the energy the two boys bring. I also lead strategy and operations for AWS. I've been at Amazon for 3 years or so, but I've been in the tech industry for the last decade and a half. And yes, living it every day as a working mom.
How have your managers best supported you through your parenting journey?
I always give this advice as a manager. And so I kind of try to live up with that, with my managers as well is, you know, speak up and tell what you want to make this work life integration possible for you. So setting your boundaries right, communicating what your priorities are, when you can show up, when you're making a trade-off. And so for me, like that's really worked well where I have communicated those as explicitly as I can, as directly as I can. And the managers have met me the halfway and said, that's great. We, as long as you're kind of on top of your work or your deliverable or whatever that is, that's okay. And so, so that's sort of very direct and open communication has been very well received on both ends. The other thing I will say, again, I feel privileged to have managers that have stopped to ask me how I am feeling. And it sounds like a small enough thing, but a lot of people don't do that, right? A lot of one-on-one conversations are, hey, here's the A, B, and C deliverable, kind of what you need, what is the roadblock. And for me, I would say I've had managers that have said, how are you feeling? Like as a person, I mean, I'm sharing a very real instance that happened over the last 2 weeks. Our family was down with COVID. My son had an accident and I was in the ER and dealing with just all sorts of stuff. And my manager called me and said, I am putting in the HR tool a leave of absence for you. And I want you to really take the time off. And he did. And I'm really appreciative because I think sometimes as, again, the working professional, you don't pause and say, is that something I can do? Is that the right time? And he was like, no, I know family's first for you, but I'm just going to do that for you. So I'm really grateful. And when I slacked him in the middle of the week on something, because I was still thinking about work, this is kind of where your managers lean in, where he said, I am not going to reply to your Slack because you're on a leave of absence. And that just showed to me that, again, right, like the companies and people, they're all people at the end of the other side as well. And they want to meet you where you need to be your best or be the most fulfilling self at work.
Mm-hmm. It really does make a difference, doesn't it?
It does. And I think to me, like those are the learnings I try to take as a manager is just how am I showing up as a more authentic leader, a more real human being that people don't feel uncomfortable talking about their whole self or the trade-offs or the challenges that they're dealing with.
Well, what advice do you have for new managers in supporting employees through changes in their work and personal lives?
I was a new manager and it's a big shift when you're coming from an individual contributor who's very much used to building and controlling their own timelines, their own schedules. And it's a big shift that happens as a manager. You have to think about, again, what you can control and what you can't control. So for me, I always say communicate, like overly communicate. Communicate what your expectations are when your expectations aren't met. Have a dialogue versus like one way communication. The second thing I would say, again, like being more of that authentic leader and authentic self, and showing up as a human being first before you show up as a manager or as a professional who has a direct reportee and you're trying to just get from point A to point B in terms of work, and just show up and ask your team, like, what is it that drives them? What drives individual person? What are they going through at work? What could you take off their plate? What accommodations you could make? And I will say, Cindy, every single time I've done that, I've had my team being more motivated than not, because they felt like I and the company and the organization was meeting them where they needed to be to bring their whole self into work versus treating them as kind of this one box where they show up, do the work, and then they leave. And so I think that integration, that if the managers can drive that, is really going to help build a team that's actually motivated to show up every day.
So this was really great. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat.